Hey, everyone. Tonight we are heading into something colder, heavier, and significantly louder. A time when engines roared, shells screamed, and metal coffins rolled across frozen hellscapes. We are going to the Eastern Front during World War II, but not as a general or a spy or a heroic freedom fighter. No, you are in the belly of a tiger tank. And it is not the impressive war movie fantasy you think it is. It is hot, it is cramped, it is loud, and it is a death sentence on treads. Before we get into it, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you have not already. Only if you actually enjoy falling asleep to this kind of bleak bedtime history. And drop a comment letting me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I am always curious to see who is trying to relax while we casually wander through humanity's worst ideas. Now maybe turn down the lights, fluff up that pillow, and try to find a comfortable position, because things are about to get very uncomfortable. Your shift starts now. You are not a tank commander. You are not the hero. You are just another member of the crew. And your ride, this 54-ton steel monster with a name that sounds powerful, is about to become the loudest, hottest, most claustrophobic trap you have ever climbed into. You are on the Eastern Front. And spoiler alert, it does not care about your survival. Congratulations, you have just arrived on the Eastern Front. It is January. Not that the month really matters, because time has begun to blur into one long frozen panic attack. The year is either 1943 or perhaps 1944. It is difficult to keep track when the calendar days are marked, more by incoming artillery than by numbers on a page. You are part of a panzer unit that has recently been redeployed from the West. You once thought the weather in France was bad. The mud there frustrated you? Certainly. But this is not mere frustration. This is something entirely different. The cold does not simply bite. It burrows deep. Your uniform, a wool coat that barely kept you warm back at training camp, has become a stiff, frozen shell. Your fingers are numb. Your toes are likely already halfway to frostbite, and you have not even left the staging area. You step off the truck that delivered you one of the last functioning supply vehicles to make it through the chaos and immediately regret it. The snow climbs up to your knees. It is not the soft storybook kind. This snow is crusted with grime, churned up by tank treads, soldiers' boots, and blood. There is a smell in the air, one that should not exist when temperatures are well below freezing. Yet it lingers a mixture of diesel, unwashed bodies, and something far more unsettling that you choose not to identify. This is merely the welcome mat. Structures are rare now, mostly because they have been reduced to ash and splinters. What buildings once stood here are now flattened, steaming piles. The ground itself can barely be called ground, just frozen, grayish mud pretending to be terrain. Trees stand like haunted silhouettes, stripped bare or snapped in half like matchsticks. There are no birds, no wildlife. Just the howl of the wind, the occasional boom of distant shell fire, and coughs from soldiers already 3 layers into pneumonia. Your tiger tank rests in what might have once been a village square, or maybe a simple crossroads. The distinction has been erased. Frost and grime cake every inch of its hull. The paint is chipped, the colors faded. That proud Iron Cross emblem is barely visible beneath a shell of soot and ice. The engine is silent. It has not run in hours. The result is a frozen steel coffin, where even the metal seems to pull the warmth from the crew's bones. You meet the other crew members one by one. None of them smile. Smiling has no place here. The commander is only 30, but his face has aged into something unrecognizable. His eyes are sunken, rimmed red from too much smoke and far too little rest. He does not offer a name. He simply nods and gestures for you to follow. The gunner speaks to no one. You are told not to take it personally. He has remained silent since the Battle of Kursk. The loader is just a kid, perhaps 18. He chews constantly on something. No one knows what exactly. Maybe a piece of frozen bread. Maybe the lining of his glove. The driver used to have a sense of humor, or so they say. That dried up last December. His most recent joke was about not feeling his toes because he no longer had any. No one laughed. You are the new addition, which means your role is uncomplicated. Do what you are told. Do not cause trouble, and try not to die, at least not in a way that makes everyone else look bad. You climb into the Tiger for the first time. The hatch resists your efforts, opening with a creak that sounds like a complaint. The metal is so cold it burns your skin. You lower yourself into the compartment. No one warns you about the smell. It strikes instantly diesel, sweat, stale leather, gun oil, and feet. Always the feet. When the engine is running, the interior becomes a humid, stinking sauna. When the engine is off, which is often, the odor just lingers, sealed in by the icy air. There is no room to stand, barely enough to sit. The turret feels like a metal womb that resents your very presence. Every surface is hard and unforgiving. Every edge is a bruise waiting to happen. You hit your head almost immediately. Everyone does. There is no apology, just a glance that says, get used to it. You take in the space. It is impressive, in its own cruel way. The engineering, the weight, the design. The cannon stretches longer than a bus. The armor is thick enough to stop almost anything. That is what the posters back home claimed, at least. No one here trusts those posters. The posters never mentioned breakdowns, or fuel shortages, or Soviet soldiers with fire in their hands and vengeance in their eyes. A canteen is passed to you. It is mostly ice. You scrape at the surface until you can sip the cold sludge beneath. It tastes like rust and regret. You are told to make it last. Water must be melted from snow now, and firewood is a luxury no one can afford. The last soldier who ventured out to find some never returned. Whether it was mines, patrols, or wolves, no one really knows. The commander calls a briefing. He speaks softly, not to keep secrets, but because loud voices feel wrong out here. The silence feels sacred in a twisted way, like the snow is listening. You are going east. Of course, the Soviets are regrouping. Someone far away, in a warm office in Berlin, believes this is the ideal moment to counterattack. You do not ask questions. The last soldier who asked a question was reassigned to the infantry, then reassigned to the dirt. Permanently, the rest of the day is spent preparing. The cannon needs cleaning. That means forcing your frozen hands into the steel throat of a machine built for destruction. The shells are massive, each one heavier than the glove-chewing kid. You help load them. You do it without gloves. You lost yours back at the depot. They did not have extras. So now it is just your bare skin against freezing brass and jagged steel. You bleed a little. No one cares. Everyone's hands look the same, raw, cracked, shredded. Night comes quickly. There is no sunset, just a gradual descent into darkness. And then there is blackness. You think you will sleep. You will not. The tank does not shut off. Not completely. The engine is fired up every so often to keep the oil from becoming solid. That means noise. A low, vibrating growl of machinery in the belly of the beast. Around you, 4 other men exhale in sync, snoring, coughing, muttering. You try to rest on a surface that was never meant to be a bed, next to live ammunition that could vaporize you in a heartbeat. You cannot stretch your legs. You cannot turn. You certainly cannot escape the stench. When someone passes gas, and someone always does it, only worsens. Canned meat, nerves, and stress are a perfect storm. You fall asleep in short bursts, maybe 20 minutes at a time. Each time, you wake with a jolt from movement, from the cold, or from the haunting thunder of something exploding nearby. You wonder, briefly, each time if this is the one that will end you. By morning, Every joint aches as though you have aged decades. Your socks are wet not from sweat, just from the breath in the air, condensing and soaking everything. Your boots are rigid. The laces snap when you try to tie them. You make do. Everyone does. The only alternative is being that guy, the one who cannot pull his weight, and nobody has time for that out here. You eat something, hard biscuits that crack your teeth, a slice of gray sausage, cold coffee if you are lucky. Duff, the conversation is minimal. Nobody wants to talk before a mission. It is not superstition. It is preservation. The less you say, the less someone has to remember you by if things go wrong. The radio hisses to life, breaking the silence with a stutter of static. Orders spill through in fragmented bursts, coordinates, objectives, time to move. The driver mutters something under his breath, then turns the ignition. The tiger shudders awake like an angry god roused from a miserable sleep. The whole chassis vibrates. Everything inside trembles. Bolts, rivets, even your own bones seem to respond. You check the gun. You brace your feet. You try to settle your breathing. You try not to think about the Soviet lines waiting ahead. Anti-tank guns buried in the snow. Mines hidden under churned earth. And the dreadful understanding that all your armor means nothing if you throw a track or if a shell finds your thin spots from above. You try not to think at all, because thinking in a Tiger tank on the Eastern Front is another way to die early. The first time you saw the Tiger, you did not think of it as a weapon. You thought of it as an obstacle, a monument of steel too large to belong anywhere. It did not seem meant to move. It looked like a bunker someone had forgotten to bury. 68 tons of menace, hunched in the middle of a half-frozen field, casting a presence of exhaustion and dread. Its paint was chipped, its treads crusted with dried mud and worse. The smell hit you even before you reached it, diesel, hot metal, and the sort of human odor that only comes from sealing 5 men into a metal box with no fresh air for days. You were told this machine was the best, a marvel of German engineering, a fortress on treads, not invincible, but close. On paper, it had the statistics to back it up. Armor so thick most Soviet shells would bounce off. A main gun that could punch through anything short of a bunker. Range, power, and intimidation baked into every bolt. But standing next to it, none of those numbers mattered. What mattered was the size, the weight, and the deafening sense that someone had tried to manufacture fear. Climbing in was your first mistake. You did not simply enter a Tiger, you wedged into it. The hatch barely opened wide enough for you to twist through, sliding down backwards into the belly of the beast. There was no ladder, no elegant descent, just cold steel scraping your coat and gravity doing the rest. Once inside, one thing became instantly clear. This was not made for comfort, not for people. Everything was metal, cold in the morning, burning hot in the afternoon, never soft, never yielding. You could not stretch your legs. You could not lean back. Even turning your head became a gamble. Every movement threatened to bang your elbow, shoulder, or skull against a lever, a hatch, or someone else's knee. Every corner had been sharpened by design or use. Ribs, knees, collarbones, nothing was safe from the relentless geometry of the tank. If the engine did not take your life, the ergonomics might. The seating arrangements were less planned and more improvised. The commander had the best position, though calling it best was generous. He crouched in a dome, legs bent at impossible angles. Everyone else made do. You, the newest, were given the leftover space, likely the worst of them all. The position rotated depending on moods, injuries, or grudges. Some days you were wedged near the floor, where engine fumes pooled and the vibrations drilled into your spine like a dentist's tool. The main gun took up more space than anything else. A beast within a beast. It required both hands to load, and sometimes both people. Always a threat to your fingers, your wrists, your patience. The shells, massive and dense, weighed nearly 20 kilograms each. They were stored wherever they would fit on the floor, behind seats, sometimes stacked so close they threatened to tumble into your lap. There was no padding, nothing to secure them. When the tank hit a bump or braked too hard, those shells shifted, and if you were in their path, you suffered. The radio sat beside the commander's shoulder, its voice a blend of crackles, static, and indecipherable commands. Sometimes it was silent. Other times, it spat out chaotic fragments, words half lost in translation, channels crossed by frustration. Communication was essential in theory. In practice, it was background noise. Another layer of stress, another sound to ignore. Storage barely existed. You carried what you could hold. Rations were stuffed into crack spread gone stale, tins of meat rusting in corners. Ammunition was everywhere else. There was no place for personal things. A photograph, if you had one, was probably wrinkled and stained, folded deep into your coat. No one made room for sentiment. Inside, conversation was rare. Not just because of the noise, though the roar of the engine could drown a scream, but because words wore thin quickly. Tension ran high. Patience ran low. One misplaced comment could spark a full-blown argument, and there was nowhere to walk away to, no hallway to cool off in. You were crammed into a steel box with 4 other men, and if you could not find a way to get along, things became unbearable fast. When the engine turned over, the real noise began. It was not a hum. It was not a rumble. It was a full-body roar that shook the bolts loose and made your teeth clatter. The sound seemed to enter through your feet, move up your spine, and settle behind your eyes. Even if you tried to speak, your words went unheard. The loader could not hear you. The driver would not respond. You repeated yourself often, louder each time, until shouting became instinct. The vibration was constant. Through the bench, through the armor, through your ribs. Eventually, it passed through your thoughts, turning them to static. The headaches followed. Low, persistent aches behind your eyes. You never knew if they came from the fumes, the sound, the cold, or the pressure. Likely all of it. There was no heat control. If the engine was on, you cooked. If it was off, you froze. In summer, the tank became a kill. In winter, an icebox. Either way, your body paid. You sweated into your uniform until it was damp and foul, or you shivered so hard your joints throbbed. Layers helped for a time, but eventually the cold crept in. And when the heat came, it never left. There were no windows, no real view. Only periscopes and vision slits, narrow, cloudy, sometimes frozen over. You did not see the battlefield. You saw a distorted piece of it, like staring through a fogged mirror. The world outside became an idea, a rumor. You relied on the commander's instructions, or on the panicked shouts of the driver when something exploded too close. You waited. You stared ahead. You obeyed. Maintenance never ended. Even when the tank sat still, it demanded attention. Tracks needed to be checked for tension. Gears needed grease. The gun had to be cleaned, again, filters replaced. And all of it done by hand. No machines, no comforts. Just you, crouching, reaching, freezing. Your fingers numb, your tools crude. You slipped, you bled, you swore. You wiped your hands on whatever surface had not been fouled completely by oil or smoke. And even when nothing was officially broken, something was always not quite right. A strange noise in the rear. A light blinking without reason. A metallic rattle near the engine block that everyone heard and no one wanted to acknowledge. You learned to ignore half the problems, because if you did not, you would never move at all. You eat where you sit. Usually cold food when there is food. Canned meat, stale biscuits, occasionally a boiled potato if someone traded for it or stole it. There is nowhere to wash your hands, so whatever is on your fingers ends up in your mouth. Hygiene is not a priority. Clean water is rare, and soap is something people laugh about. You relieve yourself when you can, which often means waiting far too long, or using a makeshift solution involving a tin can and a lot of denial. If you are moving, you hold it. If you are stopped, you find a spot behind the tank and pray no one is watching through a scope. Modesty does not survive long in these conditions. Sleep happens in pieces. 10 minutes here, half an hour there. Usually while sitting upright, helmet still on, one eye half open in case someone calls your name or the shelling starts again. You do not dream. If you do, you do not remember. The inside of a tiger tank is not built for dreaming. You do not get used to it. People say that. You will get used to it. You will not. You will learn to function. You will adapt. But you will never be comfortable. Never relaxed, always tense, always scanning the dials, the corners, the shadows outside. Always wondering when the next shell will hit, or if you will hear it at all. So yes, the tiger tank is deadly. It is powerful. It can take out an enemy from over a kilometer away with terrifying precision. But inside, it is not glorious. It is not heroic. It is not even remotely comfortable. It is 5 men packed into a moving furnace, surrounded by explosives, breathing poison, and hoping they do not stall in the wrong place. That is your home now. You have officially been assigned to the crew. No ceremony, no speech, just a short grunt from the commander and a nod towards your station, like you are a replacement part that might break just as fast as the last one. That is your welcome to the inside of a tiger tank. Functional, indifferent, and slightly hostile. There is no training montage, no dramatic briefing. You are expected to figure it out on the job, and preferably without slowing anyone down. Everyone assumes you already know what you are doing. They do not have time for explanations. The last guy did not either, and they are still scraping his boots out of the turret wall. The first thing you learn is how not to stand. There are exactly 3 acceptable body positions inside the tiger: crouched, curled, or crammed. Every movement is a negotiation with the space. You turn your shoulders. You bang into a gear lever. You sit back. You hit your head on the turret ring. You drop anything at all, and suddenly you are part of a very awkward group exercise to retrieve it before it jams something important. Everyone is always in everyone else's way. If the commander wants to look through the periscope, the gunner has to duck. If the loader shifts to grab a shell, the driver has to move his elbow or take it to the ribs. There is a choreography to it, but it is not graceful. It is more like 5 men performing a dance no one wants to learn, and everyone is too tired to care about doing right. You do not have personal space. The idea does not even exist here. You sleep beside boots. You eat beside the gun breech. If someone sneezes, you wear it. You feel every breath, every twitch, every nervous cough. There is no stepping outside for air, no taking a walk to clear your head. The only walk you will take is the one back to headquarters if the tank catches fire and you are lucky enough to get out. And if you think fresh air is an option when the hatch is open, think again. You are just inviting snow, smoke, or shrapnel inside. That hatch stays closed most of the time. The air is stale, heavy with diesel and powder residue. You get used to the smell, but your lungs do not. After a few hours, your throat burns and your sinuses sting. After a few days, you stop noticing altogether, which probably is not a good thing. Then there is the heat, not the good kind. The kind that builds slowly, clinging to every surface and making your uniform feel like wet carpet. When the engine runs too long, the temperature inside spikes. There is no fan, no air circulation. Just 5 men sweating through wool and leather, trying not to pass out before the next order comes through. During winter, the opposite problem. Metal radiates cold like a punishment. Your fingers barely work. Your boots stiffen with frost, and the condensation from your breath turns to rime on the inside walls. You learn to sit without touching anything. It does not help much. Every metal surface is either too hot or too cold. Sometimes both somehow, and you are stuck between them. Your hands are never clean. Grease, soot, dried blood from a knuckle. You split trying to fit a shell into a space that was never meant for human hands. You wipe them on your trousers until the fabric goes stiff. No one says anything. Everyone's pants look like that. When the tank is moving, the ride is not smooth. It is not even close. You lurch, sway, rattle, and bounce. Your spine gets a new alignment every time the driver hits a rut. You hang on to whatever you can reach. Gun rails, seat edges, sometimes each other. It does not matter. Something always slips, usually your stomach. The noise is constant. Engine rumble, track clatter, gear whine. Everything is amplified inside the tank. You feel it in your teeth. Your eardrums pulse in time with the movement. Someone speaks, and you just nod because you did not hear a word. You pretend you understood, because asking for a repeat makes you look slow. No one wants to be the slow guy in a tank crew. That is how you get reassigned or left behind. You get tasks. Load this, unjam that. Hold a part while someone else hits it with a wrench and a curse. Nothing works on the first try. You learn where to hit things, when to smack the turret controls, how to brace your legs so the recoil does not throw you into the shell rack. These are not lessons someone teaches. You learn because doing it wrong once usually hurts. Eating is not scheduled. It is opportunistic. A moment of silence to shovel in a spoonful of something unrecognizable and hope it is not too expired. Some crews have small stoves. Yours does not. You eat cold or not at all. Food tastes like metal and boredom. The best you can hope for is something that does not make you sick. Water is worse. You ration it. Everyone does. You sip from the canteen like it is holy. Some melt snow on the exhaust. Others just chew ice if they are desperate. You will get headaches. You will get cramps. It does not matter. You hydrate when you can, not when you need to. You get to know the other men in ways you did not want. Their habits, their tics. Who hums under stress. Who curses every time the tank turns left. Who stares at nothing when things get quiet. You do not talk about feelings. You just listen to them bounce off the steel in the silence. You start to develop a twitch, maybe more than one. A flinch when the turret rotates. A blink when the radio crackles. These are not quirks. These are adaptations. Your brain is trying to keep up with the constant sensory assault. Every time something explodes nearby, your pulse spikes and your jaw locks. And you do not even realize it until hours later when you cannot unclench your teeth. When you are parked for the night, nobody sleeps properly. You lean against something hard and try to trick your brain into drifting off, but the vibrations still echo in your body. Even when the engine is off, your ears ring. Your muscles twitch. Someone shifts in their sleep and bumps into you, and it feels like a threat. Not because they mean anything by it, but because space is so tight that anything touching you is a reminder that you cannot leave. Now maybe turn down the lights, fluff up that pillow, and try to find a comfortable position, because things are about to get very uncomfortable. That is the worst part. You cannot leave. Not just the tank, the job, the reality. You are inside a mobile machine of death that doubles as your bedroom, dining room, and panic chamber. It does not feel like armor. It feels like a trap. And even though it is technically protecting you, it also makes you a very specific kind of target. One that the Soviets are happy to hit with everything they have. There is no rank in here. Not really. Outside, yes officers, non-commissioned officers, protocols. Inside, it is survival. If the loader knows the gun better than the commander, people listen to the loader. If the driver says the engine is about to fail, you believe him. You do not argue, because arguing takes time. And time is a luxury you do not get when you are sitting on enough ammunition to vaporize everyone inside. No one is brave in a tank. Not really. There is just fear at different volumes. Some become quiet, others become angry. A few make jokes. You laugh, not because they are funny, but because it is either that or start screaming. And no one wants to be the one who breaks first. Eventually, you get used to the routines. What passes for normal in here? You know when to brace, when to duck, when to reach for the next shell. You know the difference between a direct hit and a near miss just by the way the walls tremble. You can reload with your eyes closed, and sometimes you must. But no matter how good you become, how sharp your reflexes are, how well the crew works together, there is always something you cannot control. An ambush, a mine, a jammed track, a shell you never saw. One moment you are loading around, the next you are upside down. The air is thick with smoke. Someone is screaming. Someone is not moving. No warning, no drama. Just impact, heat, and then a silence that does not feel real. You will survive some days. Other days, you will not. The tank will break down. You will run out of fuel. You will take a hit. You will fight to escape through a hatch that opened easily yesterday, but will not budge now. The crew will scatter. Some will not get far. Some will not get out at all. And the ones who do, they will climb into another Tiger tomorrow and begin again. Because the Eastern Front does not care how tired you are. It does not care how long you have gone without rest. It does not care that you have not felt dry socks in a month, or that your back feels like it has been used as a battering ram. You are a tank crewman now. Climb in, shut the hatch, and hope that this time you make it back. There is no graceful way to enter a Tiger tank. Nobody slides in. Nobody hops down like a movie hero. You do not leap from the ground and land in position, ready to fight. You climb awkwardly, slowly, usually while carrying something heavy, covered in mud, and trying not to strike your face on a sharp edge. First, your boots find the track, which is always slippery, either caked in frozen grime or slick with oil. Then you pull yourself onto the engine deck. It is uneven. Metal grates, tool mounts, loose bolts. If you are not careful, you will sprain an ankle before you even reach the hatch. That hatch, your entrance to the belly of the beast, is not wide. It looks small from the outside. It feels even smaller when you are trying to squeeze through with gear, wearing a coat that is too thick, holding your breath to keep from catching on a jagged edge. Sometimes there is frost around the rim, sometimes blood. You do not ask who is inside the turret. The space does not forgive. You do not drop in. You lower yourself, one arm, 1 foot at a time, like you are descending into a steel trash compactor. There is a moment where you hang, searching for the floor with your boot, and you realize there is no dignified way to finish this descent. So you let go and land with a dull thud, hopefully not onto someone else's leg. By the time you settle into your place, everyone else is already in position. The commander has his head half out of the cupola. The driver is tinkering with the transmission. The loader is elbow deep in a crate of shells. No one greets you. You nod, duck your head beneath the turret ring, and wedge yourself into whatever space is still available. There is no light switch. There is barely light at all. What visibility you have comes from whatever slits or cracks are open to the outside. On cloudy days, that means nothing, so you work in the dark. You memorize by touch. You know that the third bolt from the left is where your foot should rest, that the second ridge under the panel is where you stashed your gloves, if you are lucky enough to have gloves. The air is always stale. Even with the hatch open, the tank has a permanent smell. It is oil. It is canvas. It is human. It is sweat that has soaked into every surface. It is leather that has never been cleaned. It is gun oil that seeps into everything. After the first week, you can identify every crew member by scent. You wish that you could not. Once you are inside, you are inside. You do not leave for a walk. You do not take breaks. That hatch is your only exit, and no one opens it unless there is no choice. If you are in enemy territory, and you almost always are, the hatch stays sealed for hours, sometimes days. Once it closes, the tank becomes its own reality, one that does not care if you are cold or sore. The steel around you emits cold like it is punishing you. In winter, the temperature inside drops quickly. Your breath turns to crystals. You see it condense, drip down the walls, and freeze into delicate stalactites around the turret ring. Everyone shivers. No one complains. It is not worth the effort. In summer, it becomes an oven. The metal soaks up the heat. And soon it is 50 degrees inside, climbing higher. The floor burns through your boots. The shells begin to cook. You sweat until you cannot anymore. Then you sweat again. The hatch stays closed. The air becomes thick, unmoving, humid with your own breath. There is no airflow, no relief. No ladder inside either, just narrow grips and edges you memorize out of habit. Every movement is calculated. You learn how to shift your position without cracking your shin or jamming a finger in the recoil shield. And when the tank lurches across rough terrain, you brace. One hand here, one foot there, neck tilted just right, so you do not slam it into something unforgiving. Usually the gun breech, sometimes another person. There are no seatbelts, no cushions, just thin pads duct taped to slabs of steel. If they fall, you pick them up. If they rip, you use them anyway. Eventually, bare metal does not seem so bad. At least it is dry if you are lucky. You eat in this same space. You sleep here. You panic here. Rations come out of your bag, or someone else's, if yours are gone. You eat cold. You eat fast. You eat quietly. There is no table. You chew over the breech of the main gun. Someone spills something. It mixes with the grime on the floor. No one cleans it up. Sleep comes in fragments. There is no schedule. You rest when you can. Someone leans back, closes their eyes for 10 minutes while someone else stands watch. You try to sleep sitting upright, but the hum of the engine, the constant trembling, and the knowledge that you are surrounded by explosives make that difficult. The dream, if you can call it is 45 uninterrupted minutes. The reality is often much less. The hatch does not keep out the noise. Artillery, machine guns, the engine, the tracks, the groaning suspension, all of it bleeds in. The walls do not muffle sound. They magnify it. Explosions become something you feel in your jaw. Even when the battle is far off, the rumble crawls under your skin. Inside the tank, silence does not exist. Communication is simple. Yelling over the engine, slapping shoulders, pointing. The intercom system, when it works, is barely clearer than a broken radio. Most of the time, you do not need words. Everyone just knows what to do, or they pretend well enough to avoid embarrassment. If you have to ask what is going on, you are already behind. Opening the hatch again is rare, dangerous. It is also awkward. It jams, it freezes shut. The locking pin sticks. You end up beating on it with a tool until it finally gives, and then it flies open like it is angry at you. Outside, it is either freezing wind or smoke-filled heat. There is no good version. You poke your head out, feel exposed, vulnerable, and then duck back down as fast as you can. Up top is sniper country. Mortivate, open-air regret. So you stay inside, not because you want to, but because you have to. Because the alternative is worse. Outside means walking. Outside means being seen. Outside means being a silhouette for someone else's iron sight. Inside is hell. outside is shorter hell. You start to understand why the hatch matters. Once it closes, you are not just sealed in physically. You are shut off from clean air, from space, from movement, from the idea that you could just stand up and walk away. It becomes a boundary between what is tolerable and what is survivable. Once it is down and locked, your world shrinks to steel walls and diesel breath. And the strange thing, after enough time, you start feeling safer with it closed. Not because anything has improved, but because open space becomes unsettling. Too bright, too loud, too exposed. Inside a tank, everything is wrong. But at least it is familiar. At least you know what might kill you. Out there, anything goes. You get back inside, and the crew moves around you like clockwork. Irritated, tired, clockwork, but clockwork nonetheless. You lower yourself down, twist into place, exhale. The hatch slams shut above your head. There is a clang, a lurch, and the tiger starts moving. You are sealed in again, and whatever part of your brain still remembers fresh air, standing room, or personal space, it goes quiet. You are in now. The hatch is shut. The light is gone. The engine is humming low, like it is still deciding whether it wants to cooperate today. The rest of the crew settles in without a word. No one asks if you are ready. There is no checklist. Just the dull scrape of a boot against metal, the thud of a hand tapping a lever, and the faint metallic click of someone adjusting the safety on a sidearm they hope they never have to use in here. This is the part they never talk about in the training manuals. The part after you are inside, but before the tank actually does anything, when it is just you and 4 other men sharing air that was stale an hour ago and only getting worse. The interior of the Tiger tank is not a workspace. It is not a command center. It is a sealed, groaning compartment designed to move and kill things while slowly grinding its crew into sleep-deprived, nicotine-stained wrecks. Every surface is unforgiving. You cannot lean back without hitting something. You cannot stand up without catching your head on a bracket or the lip of a hatch. You cannot relax. There is no angle, no position that counts as comfortable. You start noticing the smell right away. It is not one thing. It is everything. Gun oil, fuel, crumbs of food that dropped into seams and have been fermenting quietly for days. The wool of your uniform never really dries, so it always smells damp. And the others, they have been living in this for months, not sleeping in it, living, eating, fighting, waiting. The tank is not just their vehicle, it is their home. And it smells exactly like 5 men who have not had a proper bath since the last time they saw a functioning building. There is a sourness to the air, not strong enough to knock you back, but it clings to everything. You breathe it in, and it sits in your throat. Your mouth tastes like carbon and grease. Your tongue feels like it is coated in dust. The heat is off because you are not moving yet, so the air stays still, heavy, trapped. If someone lights a cigarette, it is not smoke you smell. It is the burning reminder that your lungs do not have options anymore. Condensation gathers everywhere, on your helmet, on the inside of the viewports, on the walls. It drips slowly, forming grimy little trails down the riveted metal. Your back starts to feel damp, then your shoulders. You shift, thinking you leaned against something wet, but no, it is just the tank. It sweats when it gets cold, just like you. Your fingers start to tingle, not from cold this time, but from stillness. There is nowhere to put your arms. You cross them, uncross them, rest them on your knees, shift them to the side. Every movement nudges someone else, or bumps something sharp. Eventually, you give up and just press your hands flat against your thighs and sit still. Everything echoes. Someone clears their throat, and it rings off the hall like a cough in a cathedral. The commander whispers something into the radio. The static buzzes and dies. No reply. The loader taps a shell with his knuckle. It makes a hollow metallic note It sounds like it could echo forever. You try not to think about how many of those shells are packed into the corners of this machine. You try not to imagine what would happen if one went off in here. You try not to think about anything, but your brain keeps doing it anyway. There is always background noise, the idling engine, the slight creak of metal under tension. Your own breathing louder than it should be. You hear the driver shift his weight. Someone adjusts a belt. The loader mutters under his breath in a language that is half German, half gibberish. No one speaks unless they have to. It is not tension. It is economy. Every word is energy spent, and everyone is trying to conserve whatever scraps of energy they have left. The walls close in fast. Not literally. They are not moving. But your mind starts to register the limits. You reach out and touch the ceiling just a few inches above your head. The wall to your left is closer than you realized. The cannon breech to your right has no padding. The floor is so cramped that moving your legs makes the guy across from you adjust his without thinking. You are surrounded not by enemies, but by metal in proximity. No windows, just slits. Narrow periscopes that show slices of outside if you are lucky. Sometimes they fog over, sometimes they ice. Most of the time they show nothing useful. A blur of trees, a distant haze. You cannot see the sky, you cannot see the horizon. The world becomes a moving blur outside a metal slit. You have no context, no orientation, no sense of where you are beyond coordinates scribbled on a map you have not seen. Then the engine revs louder this time. The whole tank shifts forward a few inches. Someone swears. The driver's foot slips. Then another rev. This one is steadier. You brace your foot against the floor. Lean back into the curved wall and hold your breath. It starts moving. Everything vibrates. Not violently, just constantly. You feel it in your teeth. Your boots rattle against the floor. The panel under your arm buzzes, just enough to make your skin itch. It is like being inside a thunderstorm that never stops. You cannot hear the outside world anymore. Just the drone of the engine, the grind of the treads, and the occasional bang as the suspension reacts to the terrain. That is when the inside really starts to change. The walls go from silent to musical, but not in any pleasant way. Screws rattle. Loose gear jostles in its compartments. Spent casings clink together. Shells knock softly in their racks. Someone forgot to tie down a tool bag, and now it slides across the floor with every turn. The entire space becomes a percussion section for a nightmare orchestra. And above it all, the steady, pulsing roar of an engine that does not care about your ears. Your skin starts to feel greasy. It is not the oil. It is just the sensation of existing in here. The sweat, the recycled breath, the damp wool, none of it ever fully goes away. You itch constantly, but there is no space to scratch properly. You shift your back against the wall, hoping to find an edge to rub against like a bear against a tree, but it never helps. It never has. No one complains out loud. Everyone just adjusts in small, useless ways. One man rubs his temple. Another flicks at a smudge on his boot that will not come off. The loader rocks gently in place. Not because it brings him comfort, but because the movement distracts from the headache he has had since yesterday. No one says how they feel. They just survive in their own private, uncomfortable ways. There is no clock. Time does not pass inside a tank. It stretches, it bends, it forgets itself. You measure it in changes to the engine's tone, by the number of shells fired, by how long it has been since someone cracked the hatch and let in a single breath of outside air. Could be morning, could be dusk, could be 3 hours since you started moving, could be 8. You do not know anymore. Your body stops bothering to ask for things. Food, water, rest, it all becomes optional. It just slows down, adapts, waits. You feel a headache start to build behind your eyes, but there is nowhere to lie down, nowhere dark, nowhere quiet. So you press your palm to your forehead and ride it out like every other discomfort. Eventually, it fades not because it goes away, but because your brain adds it to the background noise. Inside the tank, there is no rest-only degrees of discomfort. You learn to function at 40%. You consider it a good day if you hit 60. At 80, you are hallucinating from fumes or dehydration. And still, the gun needs loading. The viewports need watching. The shells need hauling. You are part of the machine now. You just happen to have a pulse. Eventually, you realize the tank is not protecting you. It is holding you, trapping you like an iron lung for soldiers, keeping you alive just long enough to bring you closer to something worse. You stop thinking of it as armor. It is not. It is just the place you wait to get hit. No one says that out loud, but everyone knows. You might assume, riding inside one of the most expensive tanks Germany has ever produced, that at the very least you would be issued gear that fits, gear that works, gear that is not actively trying to kill you by being the wrong thing at the wrong time. But no, what you get is standard issue. And standard issue means cheap, uncomfortable, and definitely not made for Russian winter. Your uniform is wool, not soft wool, not the warm, cozy kind someone's grandmother might knit. No, this is industrial-grade scratchy wool, stiff, abrasive, and poorly shaped. It clings in all the wrong places and leaves gaps in all the ones that matter. The trousers sag, the jacket rides up. The sleeves are either too long, too short, or manage to be both depending on the angle of your arms and the temperature in the tank. Wool is supposed to be warm. That is what they tell you. But in practice, it does not insulate, it traps moisture. You sweat under it because you always sweat, even in winter. The wool absorbs it like a sponge and then holds it against your skin like a wet rag. Then the temperature drops. And that sweat becomes ice. Not metaphorical ice. Actual ice. You can feel crystals forming in the folds under your arms, behind your knees, along your back. And then you stop sweating, not because you have cooled down, but because your body is too tired to keep trying. Underneath that wool, if you are lucky, you have one layer, maybe two. A cotton undershirt that has not been washed in weeks, and a pair of thermal under trousers that ride up the instant you crouch. There is no elastic, no tailoring, just strings and buttons that always seem to come undone at the worst possible time. One wrong move and half your lower layer twists around your thigh like a tourniquet. Socks, if you even have a matching pair, are a minor miracle. Most of the others wear one thick sock and one bundle of cloth improvisation. The socks are coarse, threadbare, and permanently damp. Your boots were leather once. Now they are cracked, stiff, and always the wrong size. Too small and they blister. Too large and they rub raw. You stuff newspaper inside to fill the space, if you can find newspaper. If not, you just stuff more socks in and hope it works. There is no padding. That is worth repeating. There is no padding. Not in the boots, not in the uniform, not anywhere in the tank. You move, crouch, fall, and brace inside a steel box with nothing between your body and the cold metal. Your knees bruise. Your elbows swell. Your spine compresses, 1 millimeter at a time. Calluses grow in places that should never have calluses. Your body learns to hurt constantly, and eventually just tunes out what pain it can to conserve energy. The gloves you are issued do not help. They are thin leather, unlined, and they stiffen in the cold. They get slick with oil. They rip. They burn if you touch a metal surface too soon after firing. Eventually, you take them off. Bare hands work better, even if the fingertips go numb after 15 minutes. You try warming them under your arms, but your armpits are just as cold. Nothing warms anything in here. You have a scarf. It smells like everyone else's breath. You wrap it around your face until it becomes soaked with condensation and starts to freeze over. Your helmet never fits. The chin strap is either too tight or useless. It cushions nothing. It is metal, meant to deflect debris, not to protect you from a fall, or a knock to the head, or anything else that might actually happen. And you hit your head, often, usually when you try to go outside. If you even dare go outside is worse. Your boots fill with snow. Your knees lock. Your scarf turns rigid. Your jacket crackles with frost. Your breath fogs the air in slow, exhausted clouds. You keep your hands in your pockets until you absolutely need them. And when you pull them out, the wind makes you want to cry. But you do not. Your tears would freeze. And you do not want the others to see. Inside the tank, all of that same gear turns into a heat trap. The wool drinks up your body heat and turns it into sweat. You stink. Everyone stinks. No one mentions it. It is not worth discussing. You unbutton your jacket halfway, desperate to stop from overheating. But the moment the tank slows down, you start to freeze again. There is no middle ground. You are always too hot or too cold. Usually both. You try to air things out during brief stops lifting the collar, cracking the buttons, peeling off a sock, wringing it out if you have a few seconds. But there is never time. There is never enough time. And by the time you do get another chance, the damage is done. Blisters, rashes, cold burns, sores that never get a chance to heal, because you are always sitting, always sweating, always freezing, always moving. And none of it stops. Not until something breaks. And even then, it is not always the tank. Medical attention means a strip of cloth, perhaps some iodine if you are lucky. Otherwise, you simply live with it. You learn to adjust. That means discovering strange workarounds. Tying sleeves tighter with bootlaces. Wearing the same sock on your right foot for 3 days because it rubs less. Cutting holes in your gloves for dexterity and regretting it almost instantly. Everyone has their own tricks. None of them actually solve anything. They merely postpone the discomfort a little longer. There is no waterproof layer, so if it rains, you are soaked. If it snows, the snow melts and you are soaked. If you sit in one place too long, condensation from your own body turns into moisture, and once again, you are soaked. You no longer even try to stay dry. You only try to remain functional. Some men wrap themselves in extra shirts, towels, anything they can find. The tank was never meant to store clothing, but that no longer matters. You wedge your spare clothes wherever you can. You hope they do not get crushed, and you rotate them when you remember. Most of the time, you live in one uniform until it can practically stand up on its own. You smell like wet wool and quiet resignation. No one compliments anyone's appearance. Everyone looks the same grayish, rumpled, tired, and slightly burned. You might catch a glimpse of yourself in a mirror once every few weeks. And when you do, the face looking back at you feels like a stranger. The grime makes your features appear older. Your eyes sink into your face. Your skin turns patchy and pale from the cold. Your lips crack open and you bite them just to stop the bleeding. You simply keep moving. There is a myth about the German army being well equipped. Perhaps it was true once back in 1939, maybe during parades, but not here. Not in a tiger tank rolling across the endless frozen wasteland of the Eastern Front. Out here, your gear barely keeps you alive. It does not assist. It does not shield you. It only delays the inevitable. So you put it on every morning. The same uniform, the same boots, the same gloves. You stretch your fingers until the joints stop aching. You wipe down your coat, not to clean it, but to keep the grime from hardening into something rigid and unmovable. You adjust your belt. You adjust your expectations. Because no matter how much you gear up, you are still vulnerable. You are still cold. You are still sore in places you did not even know could become sore. And you are still climbing into a tank that does not care if your socks are wet or if your collar is digging into your neck like a blade. You wear the uniform, and over time, it begins to wear you back. Morning becomes a suggestion out here. There is no true sunrise, just a shift from black to gray. You know it is morning not because of a clock or a schedule, but because your stomach begins to remind you. It has been too long since it had anything remotely resembling food. And out here, the definition of food becomes flexible very quickly. You do not eat breakfast because it is warm or comforting. You eat it because you must. Because without calories, you cannot move shells. You cannot rotate the turret. You cannot operate the controls. And in this place, fatigue is not just a bad day. It is a death sentence. So you reach into the same crusty canvas satchel you have been hauling around since the last resupply and pull out what passes for breakfast in a tiger tank on the Eastern Front. The first thing you notice is the temperature. Everything is cold, not just cool, but deeply, bitterly cold. Your hands are already stiff from the air, and now you are trying to peel open a tin of something gelatinous using a folding knife with a broken hinge. The can's metal stings your fingers. The lid bends and warps instead of slicing clean. You finally wrestle it open and instantly regret doing so. The smell is immediate grease, iron, and something that might be liver. It is called flesh conserve. Meat, theoretically. In reality, it is a grayish paste that may or may not include parts of a pig no one wants to think about. You scoop it out with a spoon, or with your knife, or with a shard of stale bread if you still have some. The bread is so hard it could survive an artillery blast. If it landed on your foot, you would limp for a week. You break a piece off by sheer force of will, and it crumbles into dry, lifeless chunks. There is no butter, no jam, just bread and this meat-like substance that seems to want to escape from both your hand and your memory. There is also coffee, or at least something that resembles it, coffee substitute. It looks like the real thing if you squint and ignore the scent. It is made from roasted barley or chicory, or whatever plant material could be passed off as drinkable. There is no sugar, unless you have traded for it, which you have not. There is no milk, unless you are imagining it. You pour hot water into your dented tin mug, drop in a scoop, stir it with the end of a shell casing, and drink quickly before it cools again. It never tastes good, but it is warm, and that is the only feature anyone truly cares about. If you are fortunate, you might have something sweet, a biscuit perhaps. It will be from a ration pack stamped months ago, dry as chalk, possibly cracked, and tastes like the inside of your jacket. It does not matter. You eat it anyway. It fills the void. You chew slowly so it lasts longer. The crumbs fall into your lap and into the crevices of the tank. No one bothers to clean them. They blend with the rest of the dirt, oil, and debris. You are eating on top of layers of whatever has been spilled, dropped, or forgotten since the last cleaning, which never happened. There is always someone who eats quickly. He does not speak, just shovels the food in like it might be taken from him at any moment. It never is, but the instinct remains. There is also always someone who takes too long, slowly picking at their ration with the same knife they use to fix bolts. You try not to stare. Everyone has their own way of making the food go down and stay down. No one talks during breakfast. Not because it is sacred, but because there is nothing to say. No one wants to hear about dreams. No one cares how you slept. Everyone slept badly. Someone might mutter about the coffee being worse than yesterday's. Another might cough, clear their throat, and continue chewing. That is the extent of conversation. Sometimes the engine is already running while you eat. That is the worst version. The noise drowns out everything. The heat starts to rise, even in the cold. Fumes drift into the crew space diesel, oil, burnt rubber. You breathe it in while chewing, and it settles at the back of your throat. Your food tastes like gasoline. Your coffee tastes like exhaust. You finish eating with grime on your tongue, and lungs that feel heavier than they did when you woke up. There is no trash can. You stuff the empty can into a side pouch or toss it into the pile that is already growing beneath the loader's seat. Maybe someone will throw it out later during a stop. Or maybe not. Sometimes the pile just grows until someone loses their patience and clears it. Usually it is the driver. He is the one sitting closest to it. Your hands are greasy afterward. Always. There are no napkins, no soap, no water to spare. You wipe them on your uniform. The same uniform you have worn for 3 weeks. The same pants you sleep in. The same jacket that is stiff with sweat and smoke. Cleanliness is only a concept now. The only thing that matters is whether or not you can grip a shell and keep hold of it. That is good enough. If you need water, you drink from a canteen that tastes like old metal and faint chlorine. It is not cold. It is not fresh. But it does not freeze your teeth, and it does not kill you. That is enough. That is the standard out here. You do not ask for more. Every once in a while, someone has something different. A tin of sardines. A square of chocolate from a Red Cross package. A pickled cucumber. It gets passed around like treasure. 1 bite per man. No one hoards. Not out of generosity, but because if you are the man who does not share, no one will cover you when things go wrong, and things go wrong often. You finish eating and immediately wish you had not. Not because it was good, but because now it is gone. And you do not know when you will eat again. It could be lunch. It could be 2 days from now. It depends on fuel or supplies, or the enemy, or the weather, or some officer's last-minute decision. You eat when you can, not when you are supposed to. Now maybe turn down the lights, fluff up that pillow, and try to find a comfortable position, because things are about to get very uncomfortable. There's no brushing your teeth, no mouthwash. You rinse your mouth with whatever liquid is available, spit it onto the floor plate, and call it a day. Your breath smells like liver paste and diesel. Everyone's does. It's just part of the air now. Then it's back to work. No cleanup, no rest, no break for digestion. You shove the ration can into the pile, screw the cap back on your canteen, and grab whatever tool, shell, or lever is next on the checklist. Your stomach groans, not from hunger, but from processing whatever strange mixture of preserved meat and fuel vapor it just swallowed. And that's breakfast. It doesn't fuel you. It just delays the collapse. Getting the tiger moving isn't like turning a key and driving off. It's a process, a loud, dirty, unpredictable process that starts with equal parts prayer and profanity. The tank doesn't want to move. It never does. You have to convince it. You have to wake it up like a monster that hates being disturbed and might eat you if you touch the wrong part of its anatomy. First comes the prep. The commander gives a nod. The driver grunts. Nobody says, "Let's go." That would be too optimistic. You check everything you're supposed to check: oil levels, coolant, gear levers, instrument panel. The instrument panel barely functions. Half the dials are fogged over or flickering. You tap them. They lie to you anyway. It's cold, which makes it worse. The colder it is, the more stubborn the engine gets. In summer, you worry about overheating. In winter, you worry the engine will seize up before it even starts. The oil moves like syrup thick and grudging. You need to heat it. That usually means firing up the preheater system, which was designed by someone who clearly hated mechanics. It rarely works on the first try. So you start priming crank handles, fuel levers, battery switches. The engine is a Maybach HL230 700 horsepower V12. That sounds impressive until you realize it's basically a racing engine stuffed into a steel coffin. It wasn't made for the Russian winter. It barely tolerates the German one, and it hates you personally. You hit the starter. It whines a deep metallic whore that sounds like the tank is coughing. Nothing happens. You wait a few seconds. Try again. Same sound? A little louder. Still nothing. The commander says nothing. Just glances at you, then the horizon, then back at you. Pressure builds with every second the engine refuses to come to life. You try a third time. This one's different. There's a low rumble, a judder, then a stuttering roar like something enormous. And Angry just woke from a 3-week nap. The hull vibrates. The air fills with the smell of hot oil and ancient smoke. You feel it in your ribs. You swear. You say nothing. The commander nods again. That means it's working. Kind of. The whole tank begins to shudder. It doesn't idle. It thrashes like it resents being awake and wants everyone inside to know it. You feel it through the bench, through your boots, through the shell you're holding, which is now vibrating slightly in your hands. The floor shakes. The walls buzz. The sound is deafening, but that's normal. You stop noticing after a while. Then the fumes hit. You'd think the exhaust would stay outside. It doesn't. It seeps back in through the cracks in the hull, through the floor, through the engine compartment. It mixes with diesel, gun oil, old socks, and fear. Breathing becomes a conscious effort. You pull your scarf up over your mouth. Doesn't help. Nothing helps. The engine ticks over for a minute or two. You don't rush it. You let it warm up, like coaxing a wild animal. Touch the throttle too soon, and it sputters and stalls. Push it too hard, and it will blow something. Everything's fragile in a Tiger. Big, yes. Strong, technically. But delicate, too. There are stories about tanks throwing rods during combat. Entire engines seizing mid-fight. Stories no one laughs about. The driver shifts gears. First, it's always sticky. The lever resists like it's glued in place. You hear a loud clunk. That could be the gearbox, or could just be a warning. He tries again. It moves. The Tiger lurches forward like it wasn't quite ready, which it wasn't. None of you are. Moving is a victory, but it doesn't feel like one. It feels like being dragged forward by something larger than you, something with no interest in where you're going. The treads squeal against the frozen ground. The hull groans. Everything vibrates. Inside, you brace. Outside, snow sprays up from under the tracks. Mud flies. The tank begins to roll. The first 100 meters are the worst. The engine coughs. The track alignment feels off. You listen for noises that shouldn't be there. Metal rubbing, high-pitched grinding, anything sharp. You don't always hear it over the roar. You learn to feel it instead. The seat shifts under you in the wrong way. Suddenly, you're flagging down the driver. Something's about to fail. The loader keeps one hand on the ready rack, the other steadying himself against the sidewall. You can't stand. You can't sit comfortably. You just sort of exist in a low crouch, braced against the tank's constant argument with physics. The gunner adjusts the optics. The commander peers through the periscope. You blink and try to ignore the smell. Then inevitably, something makes a noise it shouldn't. A bang, a knock, a heksh. Everything stops. The driver says nothing. The commander curses under his breath. The engine's still running, but the Tiger won't move. Maybe it threw a track. Maybe the transmission jammed. Maybe it's just reminding you who's really in charge. You wait. The commander considers options. Reverse. Adjust. Try again. The engine revs. The tank shakes. The transmission groans, like it's in pain. Then suddenly, it grabs. And you lurch forward, so fast you hit your shoulder against the turret ring. You don't complain. You don't even curse. You just reset your position and try not to lose your grip on whatever you're holding. Now you're moving properly. Sort of. You hit a patch of frozen ground, and the tank slides slightly. Not enough to panic. Just enough to remind you there's no traction. Then it bites. The tracks grind forward. You pick up speed. Not much, but enough to make you feel like part of something unstoppable again. It's a lie, of course, but it's a lie that helps. The commander calls out a heading. The driver adjusts. The hull groans with every turn. The road is a suggestion. The path is made up as you go. You're steering a mountain that doesn't like to change direction. When it does turn, everything inside shifts. You bump into the loader. The loader bumps into the shells. The shells rattle in their racks. You pass a tree line, then a wrecked building, then a crater. Each one a reminder that nothing here is permanent. Not the terrain, not the structures, not the tank, not you. The engine roars louder. The Tiger starts climbing a shallow hill. The treads dig in. The frame shudders again. You reach for a brace point. Doesn't matter if you've done this 100 times. You still brace. Everyone does. At the top, you pause not by choice. The tank hesitates like it's tired already. The engine wins. A little steam hisses from a valve near the back. The smell of burning oil grows stronger. The commander leans forward. The driver presses the pedal again. Slowly, the tank continues. This is how every movement starts, not with confidence, not with a charge, but with hesitation, warning signs. A machine that demands negotiation, constant management, and a good dose of superstition. The engine's running now, but everyone watches it like it might quit at any second, because sometimes it does. Driving a Tiger tank is like trying to steer a refrigerator through a minefield with a sock over your head. You're not looking out at the world. You're not scanning the terrain with a panoramic view. You're staring through a literal slit maybe 2 inches tall, maybe 10 inches wide. That's it. That's your window to the world. Everything else is guesswork. The driver S slit is reinforced glass backed by a steel plate that can slide down if things get dicey. When it's open, you get a limited, blurry tunnel vision of what's in front of you. Trees, snow, maybe the back of another tank if you're in a column. When it's closed, you're using a periscope, which gives you even less. The periscope fogs up every few minutes, leaving you with shapes, shadows, and movement. You pray there's no ambush, no side mirrors, no rear view, no reverse camera. Your knowledge of what's behind or beside you comes entirely from yelling. The commander tells the driver what to do. The driver repeats it back. If it's wrong, someone gets thrown sideways. The tank clips a tree or lands in a ditch no one saw coming. Happens all the time. There are other viewports for the gunner and the commander, but they don't offer much more. The commander can rotate his cupola, peer through several angled slits, or through a rotating periscope if he has one installed, but even that only gives him a fraction of a view. It's not panoramic. It's not even functional half the time. If mud splashes up or snow cakes over the glass, visibility drops to 0. You wipe it with a rack or your glove, or you just wait for the next bump to shake it loose. Peripheral vision doesn't exist. Or maybe everything outside could be on fire, and you'd never know unless someone radioed it in, or it started dripping onto your armor. If infantry are moving up on your flanks, you won't see them. If someone's waving at you to stop, they better be standing directly in front of your path, or they're out of luck. The radio is supposed to help. Supposed to. But the radio isn't reliable. It crackles, cuts out, or decides to pick up someone else's channel, just when you're retrying to hear if there is a minefield up ahead. Even when it works, there is a delay. By the time someone says left, you've already hit whatever was supposed to be avoided, so you drive blind. Not in the poetic sense, in the literal, I have no idea what is happening outside this box sense. The terrain is uneven. A tank lurches. You hit bumps you don't see, holes you never expected, logs, rocks, frozen bodies. Sometimes the tank rides over them. Sometimes it gets stuck. Sometimes it just slides sideways, and everyone inside grabs something solid, bracing for the worst. Speed doesn't help. The Tiger isn't fast. Not on paper. Not in practice. It crawls even when it's functioning perfectly. And you wouldn't want it to go faster. At top speed, you lose what little control you have. The engine screams. The gears grind. The whole frame feels like it might shake apart. There's no thrill. No wind in your hair. Just noise and motion. And the knowledge that you, responsible for several dozen tons of steel that could fall into a ditch or take out an entire squad of your own troops if you make the wrong turn. Navigation is another nightmare. No GPS. No map in front of you. The commander might have one, if it's still accurate. If it wasn't printed 2 months ago and based on terrain that has since been bombed into something unrecognizable. You follow compass bearings. You follow orders. You follow tracks in the snow. Sometimes you follow the vague idea of what feels like the right direction and hope no one notices if you reel a little off course. Obstacles come fast. Your reaction time is 0. You don't see the trench until you're already in it. You don't see the tree stump until it punches into the suspension. You don't see the anti-tank ditch until the front end's hanging over it like a steel teeter-totter. There are no brakes sharp enough to save you. You stop when you hit something. That's the default method. Communication inside the tank doesn't help. You shout over the engine. The gunner can't hear you. The loader is focused on keeping the next round ready. The commander barks directions, but they come in bursts, left, stop, back, forward, no, not that way, and you try to interpret them fast enough to avoid disaster. You develop instincts, muscle memory, a feel for the terrain based on how the treads shift under you, a guess about what kind of slope you're on based on how much the tank leans. You notice patterns in the vibration changes. If it gets sharper, you're on rocks. If it softens, you're in mud. If it disappears, you're airborne, and that's very bad. Every now and then, someone opens a hatch for better visibility. It's risky. A sniper could be watching. A mortar round could land while your head's sticking out. But sometimes it's the only way to see what you're about to drive into. The commander pops the cupola, takes a quick glance, yells back a correction, slams it shut again. His face looks 10 years older when he does. Snow makes it worse. It covers everything. Trenches, mines, fences, wreckage. What looks like flat ground could be a crater. What looks like a clear path could be ice. What looks like cover could be a burned-out vehicle ready to collapse. You drive slowly, carefully, like every inch is a trap because it probably is. When it's foggy, you might as well be buried alive. No lights. That would give away your position. No headlights. Those are off unless you're so far from the front, it doesn't matter. So you crawl through white nothingness. Every shape a threat. Every sound a warning. The tank becomes a blind rhino, powerful, armored, and nearly helpless. Getting stuck is just a matter of time. Snow drifts, mud pits, loose rubble. You feel traction drop, weight shift, and suddenly the tank isn't moving. The engine groans. The treads spin. Everyone inside tenses. You try reverse. Nothing. You try rocking it. Still nothing. Then comes the real fun, climbing out into open enemy territory to check the damage, dig out the track, or call for help that might never arrive. So you stay focused, hyperfocused, not because you're confident, but because you're scared. Because you know there's no room for error. You've seen what happens when someone misses a tree line by 5 feet or drives into a ditch at the wrong angle. You saw what was left of the last crew. Driving a Tiger isn't glory. It's pressure. Constant, exhausting pressure. You don't see the war. You feel it through your fingertips, your knees, your spine. You feel it every time the ground shifts unexpectedly, or the tank jolts for reasons no one can explain. You feel it every time you try to make a turn and can't tell if you're re-heading into safety or a kill zone. You don't see the battlefield. You feel its edges pressing against your steel box, trying to get in. The first shot always comes without warning. Not a slow build-up, not a tense standoff, not a dramatic announcement. Just boom, a sharp cracking noise in the distance. Or maybe not in the distance at all. Maybe it lands close. Maybe it hits something nearby. Maybe it hits you. You don't hear it the way it happens in films. There's no dramatic whistle, just an explosion, a vibration of sound that slams into the side of the tank and makes everything inside jump. You duck automatically, even if the shell already missed. Reflex, not logic. The commander yells. The gunner swings into action. The loader's already reaching for the next round. Everyone knows their job. You know yours. You brace, listen, and get ready for whatever part you're meant to play, because now you're in it. The Tiger has an 88mm main gun. It's long, it's loud, and when it fires, it doesn't ask questions. It just erupts. When the round goes off, it feels like someone hit the inside of your skull with a frying pan. The sound isn't just noise, it's pressure. The blast punches through the space and rattles your lungs. You feel it in your teeth. The gun recoils. The turret groans. And if you weren't ready, you end up half on the floor. The loader is already grabbing the next shell 40+ pounds of steel and explosive. He moves fast, because the slower he moves, the slower you fire, and the longer you're sitting still in a field full of people trying to kill you. He shoves the round into the breech. It locks with a click. Another target gets called out. Another thunderclap. The tank shifts with every shot, not dramatically, just enough to feel it. You can tell when you've hit something solid. There's a deeper note in the echo, a satisfying jolt that runs up your spine. But you don't get to dwell on it. For every shell you fire, someone else is firing back. Enemy tanks are out there. T-34's fast, maneuverable, hard to track when they're using trees and smoke for cover. Sometimes they show up, take a few shots, and vanish. Other times, they come straight at you in packs. That's when it gets real quiet inside the tank. Not because no one's talking, but because everyone is breathing through their teeth focused, trying to stay ahead of what's coming next. Then the Soviets bring out the infantry. You don't see them either. You see shapes, movement, maybe a flash. Then a bottle arcs through the air. Glass filled with gasoline and something worse. It hits the armor, breaks, and flames crawl across the engine deck like angry snakes. The driver curses. The commander yells for the extinguisher. You grab it, spray it, pray it works. The fire doesn't always go out. Sometimes it just finds another place to settle. The tank wasn't made for this kind of close-range ambush. It's a sniper, not a brawler. A cathedral on treads, not a knife fighter. But that doesn't matter when you're surrounded. You rotate the turret. You pivot the barrel. You fire at whatever you can, buildings, trees, snowbanks that might be hiding something. You don't get confirmation. You just shoot and hope. Every round you fire makes the tank hotter. The metal heats up. The air thickens. Smoke from the cannon leaks back in. You cough. Everyone does. The loader's face drips with sweat, even though it's freezing outside. The periscope's fog. The gear stinks. Your uniform clings to your back like a wet rag, and there's no time to adjust anything. Then comes the next shell. You don't see it coming. You just feel it. An impact shakes the whole hull. Maybe it hit the front plate. Maybe it scraped the side. Maybe it bounced off the turret ring. You don't know. The commander checks the damage by listening. The driver adjusts course. You say nothing and brace again. Sometimes a hit penetrates. That's when everything happens at once: heat, noise, smoke, screaming. You don't always get a warning. You don't always get a second chance. Sometimes the shell goes clean through. Sometimes it shatters inside and everything sharpens. Shrapnel, flame, splinters of steel, ripping through space faster than your brain can process. That's why you sit hunched. That's why you wear your helmet, even when it's uncomfortable. That's why you never ever let yourself relax. The tiger is tough. It can take a hit, but only from certain angles, only in certain conditions. The armor's thickest at the front. The sides are weaker. The back? Don't think about the back. If they get behind you, you're done. Everyone knows it. The commander keeps scanning. The gunner swivels. The loader grabs another round. The driver keeps moving. Nobody says it out loud, but everyone knows this could be the moment the armor stops working. Shells keep coming. Mortar now. That's different. That's top down. You hear a whistle this time. Then an impact. Maybe nearby. Maybe too close. The tank rocks. Dust and rust flakes fall from the ceiling. A bolt comes loose somewhere and rolls across the floor like a metal coin of bad luck. You're not moving fast. The tiger never moves fast, and that makes you a target, a big one, a valuable one. Soviet gunners know what the tiger looks like. They know its weaknesses. They call it out the second they see you. And once you're spotted, it's open season artillery, tank destroyers, anything with enough punch and a line of sight. You start hearing that specific clank, not the tank, not the gun. The sound of something pinging off the armor. Small arms fire, ricochets, rifle rounds hitting the hull like insects against a windshield. You ignore them. They don't matter not, unless someone gets close with explosives. Not unless the hatches get popped. Not unless they find the weak spots. Sometimes they do. Sometimes you see the effects before you understand what happened. Smoke coming through the floor vent. A sudden loss of pressure. A noise that isn't just loud. It's final a hiss, a scream, a snap of cable or bone. Something explodes nearby inside. Too close. You shout for help. The commander yells. The loader's down. You try to move, but the heat's rising. The ammo's still in the rack. The tank's still running. You're still alive, but for how long? No one's sure. And even if you survive the hit, you're not done. There's no pause, no reset. You reload. You refocus. You fire again. Another target. Another flash. Another round fired into a blur of smoke and trees. Your hands shake. Your shoulders ache. Your brain feels like it's vibrating inside your skull. You forget who you're shooting at. You stop looking for uniforms. You just track motion, aim, and squeeze the trigger over and over until the noise becomes the only thing you hear. Until your ears ring between every shot. Until you don't even flinch when the next impact comes. Because inside the tiger in combat, you're not the hunter. You're not the apex predator. You're a moving bullseye with a very big gun. And everyone's aiming right at you. The thing about facing the Soviets on the Eastern Front is you're not just up against an army. You're up against weather, terrain, numbers, and a level of determination that doesn't make sense until you're staring down the barrel at it. There's no warning, no grand maneuver, no trumpet blast, just motion in the tree line, black smoke curling in the distance, and the quiet, instinctual feeling that you're no longer alone in this field. Then it starts. Sometimes it's a shell, sometimes a burst of machine gun fire, but often it's a Molotov cocktail, arcing through the air, silent, glowing, and impossibly fast. It spins lazily before smashing against the hull, lighting the world up in orange. Flames spread instantly, licking over the engine deck and searching for anything flammable. The tank wasn't built for this kind of close-range swarm. You're in a fortress, but one that panics under fire. The driver reacts first, slamming the gear and backing up hard. The engine screams. The treads fight for grip on ice and mud. You bounce in your seat. The crew scrambles. One man grabs the fire extinguisher. Another opens the rear hatch just enough to throw out the burning mess. Fumes flood in. It smells like burning fuel and cooked metal. The tank doesn't stop. The fire might be out, but the threat isn't. Because where there's one Molotov, there are more. Soviet infantry loves them. Cheap, simple, devastating. A few bottles, a few brave souls with rags and vodka bottles full of fuel. And even a tiger starts to sweat. You can't shoot them all. They're fast, low to the ground, always too close by the time you see them. Then come the tanks, T-34s, mostly. They're everywhere. You see one crest a ridge, then another appears from behind a pile of rubble. They're smaller, faster, easier to replace, and they move like they know it. While your gunner is still rotating the turret, the first T-34 is already darting left, trying to get behind you. That's the game. They don't want a straight fight. They want your sides. They want your rear armor. They want the spot where your glorious tiger becomes just another burning wreck on the steppe. You rotate the turret slowly, too slowly. The loader shoves a shell into the breech. It locks. The gunner lines up the shot, fires. The tank shudders. You don't even look to see if it hit. You assume it did, because missing means you're wasting time you don't have. But the other T-34s are already flanking. You try to pivot the hull. The driver guns it. The tank groans. Tracks chew into frozen earth. You spin, but not fast enough. The turret can't keep up. The gun's still swinging to the right when another shell slams into the side of your armor. The impact is muffled like a fist hitting a wall. It didn't penetrate, but it rattles everything. A crate tips. A loose shell rolls. You brace yourself against the recoil guard and bite your tongue. Literally. The commander's yelling now. Directions, distances, targets. He can't see everything either. Smoke is everywhere. Your optics are fogged. One of the viewports has a crack. Doesn't matter. You fire again. This time it's close. Too close. You watch the round leave the barrel and hit something metal and green. The T-34 erupts. Fireball. Debris. Chunks of track and turret fly upward, spin, and rain back down in ugly shapes. The ground shakes for a second. You feel like maybe you're winning. Then you realize there are more. Always more. The Soviets don't stop. They keep coming over hills, through burned-out buildings, across fields you thought were empty. You hit 1, 2, 3. But they keep appearing like water, seeping through a crack. The tiger was built to dominate on paper. In the field, against endless waves of determined attackers, it starts to feel like a heavy, lumbering liability. Ammo gets low. That's the next panic. The loader calls it out. You check the racks. 8 shells left. Then 6. Then 3. Every round becomes a question. Is this one going to save us? Or should we hold it for the next tank that might come around the corner? Then the infantry gets closer. Rifles, machine guns, grenades. The tiger isn't invincible to small arms. But it's not immune to luck. And all it takes is one Soviet with a sticky charge and no fear. You can't see them all. They're running between trees, ducking behind craters. Some crawl right up to the sides. You hear the clang of boots, fists, or something hitting the exterior. Someone's trying to climb you. Someone's trying to drop something down the hatch. Your sidearm's useless. There's no room to draw it. You grab a wrench, the butt of your helmet, or your elbow. Slam the hatch shut and hope the locking pin holds. The loader's already swinging the turret, trying to blast a group out of cover, but the gun doesn't aim that low. You're too big, too slow, and now too close to fire. The smell of fire returns. Not from outside this time, from inside, something near the rear vent. The engine's too hot. The fire that hit earlier didn't go out completely. It hid. Now it's back. Someone's screaming. You don't know who it might be you. You vent the engine bay. Smoke pours in. You cough until your ribs hurt. Your eyes burn. You reach for the fire system. It doesn't work. You try the backup. It sputters. Someone pours water from a canteen over a hot panel. Steam hisses. Adding to the chaos, the radio crackles. You hear orders. Pull back, or maybe hold the line. Or maybe it's just noise. The commander slams the headset down. His hands are shaking. Outside, another Molotov hits. The whole tank rocks. You grab whatever you can to stay upright. The turret ring locks. The gun won't rotate. You're a sitting target now. You reload. But the next shell might not matter. The T-34 that disappeared earlier comes back into view, circling wide. You see the muzzle flash. Then black after the smoke clears, assuming it does. You're still inside the Tiger. You're still breathing. The tank didn't burn this time. That's the good news. The bad news? Something broke. You don't know what yet. You just know the engine doesn't sound right. The controls aren't responding the way they should. Something under your seat is vibrating harder than it did yesterday. And there's a smell you can't quite place. Something metallic. Something that usually means stop moving immediately. Mechanical failure isn't an event out here. It's a routine. The Tiger was over-engineered. German craftsmanship, precision design, complex parts, tight tolerances stuff that looks great in a factory, on a test track, in a propaganda film. But out here in the mud and ice, 100 kilometers from anything resembling a workshop, it's a problem. A big one. You start hearing things before anyone says it out loud. A grind when the turret rotates. A wheeze in the brakes. The clutch pedal sinks too far. The gear doesn't engage right away. One of the periscopes suddenly doesn't move anymore. These aren't combat problems. They're wear and tear. And they pile up. The gearbox is always the first suspect. It has an 850 horsepower Maybach V12 trying to push 54 tons of armor through ground barely passable in a Jeep. It runs hot. It burns oil like it's a hobby. It needs constant attention. And when it doesn't get it, it starts to let you know. A delayed gear shift turns into a jammed transmission. A loose gear selector becomes a snapped linkage. The whole system groans like it's 2 missed greasings away from eating itself. You tell the commander. He nods, tells you to keep moving. Because what else are you going to do? The turret rotation system starts lagging. You crank the manual traverse, and it's stiff way stiffer than it should be. Could be frozen lubricant. Could be damage from the last hit. Could be a hydraulic line leaking somewhere. You don't have tools to fix it properly. You barely have rags. So, you wipe the grease off your gloves and try to work the crank until your shoulder starts to burn. That's the repair method now. Apply brute force and hope it doesn't make things worse. Then it's the suspension. The torsion bars underneath keep this beast from shaking itself to pieces. They work fine until they don't. One day, the tank rides like it's floating on steel clouds. The next day, every bump feels like someone kicking you in the spine with a brick. You hear it too. The suspension doesn't just give out. It screams first. Loud metal-on-metal shrieks echo inside the hull and bounce around your skull like a wasp with a grudge. You report that too. Another nod. Keep going. Maybe it'll last. Sometimes you throw a trek. That's not hypothetical. It happens. Maybe you hit something too sharp. Maybe the ground was too soft. Maybe the guide horns sheared off again. Doesn't matter. You know it the second the tank lurches sideways and stops responding. Everyone groans. Not because it's dramatic, but because they know what comes next. Someone has to get out. Out of the tank. Into the open. In front of God, enemy snipers, and every bad decision that brought you here.